Hi, everyone. So nice to meet you. I'm Ariel, and I'll be leading this workshop today. I'm so excited to explore printmaking with all of you. So I have some materials up on this slide right now. So if you haven't already gathered materials at home, go ahead and do that. This is a activity that's great for all levels, especially beginners. We're going to be just using materials that you all can find around your house and just kind of explore the basics of printmaking. So thanks so much for joining my session today. I just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about what printmaking is. Since we have a lot of beginners today, I thought we should just explore a little bit of those basics. So printmaking involves the creation of a master plate from which multiple images are made from. So the artist chooses the surface of what they want to be that plate. So this can be linoleum, it can be styrofoam, metal, cardboard, or stone. And today we're going to be using styrofoam. The artist prepares the plate by carving, etching, or drawing an image onto it. After that, we then apply ink, and paper is pressed on top of the plate by hand or a printing press. And the final image is then pulled off from the plate. So here in these pictures, you can see some traditional printmaking ink and this tool called a brayer, which helps us spread the ink, some carving tools, and this is an example of a traditional printing press. So the exciting thing about printmaking is that you don't need all these fancy materials and equipment to learn how to print. So that's why I asked you all to gather some things around your house like styrofoam, pens, markers, or if you have printmaking ink in a brayer, please bring those with you today as well. Right here you can see some examples of styrofoam plates like we'll be using today and some tools that other people have used. So we're going to be using mostly just a pen and pencil, but if you have a wire brush, some nails, even toothpicks to make really fine lines, you can gather those things as well so we can practice making different textures onto our styrofoam. And then here are some examples of the types of prints that you all may be making today. So you can use lots of colors, or you can just use one color, and we'll practice applying the ink or whatever material you're using for color today to your styrofoam. All right, so I have a couple prompts here, and I'm gonna ask you all to pick one of the two. So you can choose an object in your space and turn that object into a character, or you can create a Valentine's Day inspired drawing. And if you want an extra challenge, I'll ask you to incorporate text into your design. But if you're going to incorporate text, you'll have to keep in mind that that will need to be flipped, because when we do print our image in the end, your entire image will be flipped. So I'm going to end this PowerPoint and I'm going to switch over to my second camera so we can work step by step together. All right. So over here, you can see I've gathered some of my materials. And the first thing that I'm going to ask you all to take is just your piece of styrofoam. So if you're using a plate or a box, you may want to just cut out a piece of that so it's just a small, easy size to work with. And you want to keep in mind that your styrofoam does need to be flat. And the next step is I'll ask you to just trace your piece of styrofoam onto a piece of scrap paper. And we're going to take some time right now to think about what your design is going to look like and to draw a sketch of that onto your scratch paper.
We had a question in the chat. What if the styrofoam is from a package and it's thick?
I think that should be fine. We're going to do lots of experimenting today, especially because I'm guessing that you all are coming in here with different materials and things you found at your house. So I think it's going to also be a fun opportunity for you all to just in the chat write some of your findings and what you're discovering and figuring out. And also it's a chance for us for everyone, not just me, to give you some ideas of how you can solve some of those problems. So I'll just give you a reminder of those prompts. Either choose an object in your room and turn that into a character, or create a Valentine's inspired image. So I think I'm going to create some flowers for Valentine's Day. And let's just take about 5 minutes to get our drawing on our paper.
Another question, if you're okay answering while you're drawing, there was someone asking if you would recommend doing a simple design or a complex design for this.
I think either way is a great option. If this is your first time printmaking and you just want to explore the process, maybe start with something simple, just so you'll have time to complete that whole process with me today and you don't have to spend too much time on your drawing. But if you're excited to get into a detailed drawing and want to make a Valentine's card that you'll give away, go make all the details you want. So you can tell I'm just kind of making a quick drawing, not thinking too hard about what it's going to be. I'm just excited to get to that carving process and start thinking about transferring my image onto my styrofoam plate. And I'm gonna just try to do some backwards writing freehand, so we'll see how this goes. All right, so keep drawing, but I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next step. And when y'all are ready, you can follow along. Maybe I'll even just add some background texture. So I'm really thinking about how I can use the entire plate and how I can make my image interesting and really just use the entire space of my styrofoam. So maybe you want to think about how you can activate your background, and if you want to add a design or some text, those are all fun things to do. Okay, so I think I am ready to start transferring my sketch onto my styrofoam plate. So there is a couple of different ways that you all can do this. If you want to just freehand onto your styrofoam, go for it. If you don't feel like completely drawing again from scratch, another option is you can first cut out your sketch to be the exact size of the styrofoam. So I'll give you all a second to do that. Now that I have cut out my design to be the exact size of my styrofoam plate, I'm gonna just lay it directly on top. And with my pen, I'm going to trace it onto my styrofoam. So, we'll see how this works for the different types of styrofoam you brought with you. Maybe if it's a thicker one, it's not gonna work as well this way, and you'll want to draw directly onto the styrofoam itself. But if you lift it up, you can see that it's being transferred onto my plate like this. So let's all start by doing that. And then we'll want to kind of go over everything on the plate again with your pen to make sure that it's really going deep into your styrofoam. Just like that, okay? If you have any other carving tools that you're using today besides a pen, I'm excited to see what kind of marks those are going to make onto your plate.
So someone in the chat asked, you want to actually have pin on the styrofoam, right? And not just the indentation?
Yeah, you are welcome to. That's not going to affect how your print looks in the end. And it's kind of nice, in my opinion, just to be able to see that image directly on there so you know what it's going to look like very clearly. But if you have some other tools that don't show you that don't make a mark onto your styrofoam, kind of like those pictures I showed in our slideshow, then that's okay too. Now, the fun thing about printmaking, in my opinion, is that you're not just stuck with one image in the end. You're able to make multiple copies or additions with the plate that you've carved out. So if you've decided that you're going to make a Valentine's Day card today, then you can actually make multiple by printing your plate multiple times. So I'm gonna take my sketch paper off, and as you all can see right here, you can see a lot of my marks that I made. Now I'm gonna take the time to go over them and add any last detail I want to show up in my print. And I decided to not trace my background stripes just because that's something that I can easily freehand. And you want to remember to really dig deep into your styrofoam and think about those grooves that you're putting in. It's always fun if you have different tools to make your marks to think about varying your line qualities and the thickness of your lines. So I really like the idea of using a wire brush if you have something like that to get some like really thin textural lines, but I'm just going to use this pen today.
Can I ask, how did you discover this method of making?
So that is a great question. So I am also an educator, so I work with kids, and just thinking about ways where, we can experiment with printmaking in a very accessible way that, you don't need all the crazy equipment and tools. Like, I think anyone can really find some styrofoam at home, and it's a great activity, in my opinion, just to learn the basics of printmaking without getting really stressed out about the specifics of how to use, like linoleum carvers and how to make those marks and safety and all of those things that you do have to think about when you're doing relief printmaking. Has anyone ever done this method before? You can share in the chat if so.
Yeah, I have. I love it. It's nice because like you said, you don't always have the tools, so it's always the best.
Thanks for sharing, Michelle. Yeah, I agree. And, while it's great for beginners, I do think it's a fun way to be resourceful with your trash too, and to make prints really for all ages. So without just all the work that really goes into carving a linoleum or a wood block. So I do like the speedy aspect of it as well. So I'm just going to finish up my drawing over here, and I hope that you all are kind of getting to a similar point. And then we'll get into inking up our plates and practicing making prints and even making some additions today, or multiple copies of your prints. for any of you who are teachers or are thinking about doing this activity with your kids or anything like that, I actually just ordered a pack of styrofoam sheets like this from Amazon, and I think it was like $10 for 100 of them. So if this is something you want to keep doing, there are some really nice, like thin and smooth sheets that are great for this. All right, so I think I'm done. And let's get started inking up our plates. Just give me a second here. So I'm going to use some printmaking ink today, but I'll kind of give you some tips of what you can do if you don't have printmaking ink. So let me introduce some tools that we'll be using. I have some speedball ink right here. I have some red ink and some white ink, thinking that maybe I can mix colors together as well and make some pink. I have this palette knife. If you don't have a palette knife to spread your ink, maybe you have a piece of cardboard or cardstock that you can cut out to help you spread your ink. I have this tool right here called a brayer, which is to help us spread out our ink and then roll it onto our styrofoam plate. So if you don't have a brayer or don't have ink, I recommend finding some juicy markers that you have. I'll demonstrate how you can use that. Or if you want to try using some paint and paintbrushes, I don't have too much experience doing that, but I'd love for you all to try it out, and you can write in chat how that's going for you and share that with the other participants. And then lastly, I'm going to use this wooden spoon today to apply pressure from my paper onto the plate to transfer the image. So this is the tool that we're going to use instead of a printing press. You can also use another traditional printmaking tool called a baren to do the same thing, which will help you apply pressure to your plate just by using your hand. So y'all are welcome to follow along with me now. I'm gonna just go ahead and put some ink straight onto my inking plate. So I'll put a little bit of red there. And this one's kind of old, so it's acting a little strange. That's okay. And if you are using printmaking ink today, I recommend maybe putting a piece of scrap paper or newsprint underneath your styrofoam so that you don't get your surface too messy. And another thing to keep in mind is that you'll want to be working on a hard surface today, not a soft surface. So we'll practice right now just using one color to ink up your plate, and then we can get a little bit creative in a while and maybe cut out some pieces and ink them up in separate colors. So if you're interested in doing that, you can grab an X-Acto blade if you have one, or just some scissors, and we can try inking up our plates with different colors. Another thing to keep in mind is you want to have your paper that you're going to print on ready. So maybe you want some scrap paper to make a couple proofs for your first tries to see how that's going to look. And then if you want some nicer paper, like some blank cards to make a greeting card, or just a nice piece of paper so you can hang up your artwork if you want, you can have that cut to the right size so you can print that once you've done a couple proofs. Are y'all ready to get started? I'm also gonna grab a paper towel so I can make sure I keep my station clean. So I'm gonna take this red ink, maybe mix just a little bit of white into it, see what kind of color we can make right here. And I think that looks pretty good, a little peachy, salmony. I'm curious what colors you all are using today. And then I just want to share that if you do not have ink, what you can do with your markers, you'll want to make sure they're not dried up markers. So get some fresh markers and you're going to color it over your entire image. And we're going to do the same process of rubbing our paper on top of our plate. So if you're using markers, you can definitely use different colors and to color in different areas. But if you're using ink right now, we're going to just use one color. So I'm going to just spread out my ink over here. You don't need a lot. I would keep it kind of thin because when you start to roll your ink onto the styrofoam, you don't want it to go into the crevices because that will really take away from the detail. So just a thin layer. I'm gonna just start to roll up my brayer. And this is always a good sound to listen for when you're inking up your brayer. So you can tell when you look at my palette that it's just a really thin layer of ink.
ASMR brayer style.
Yes. Now for the fun part, everybody. I hope y'all are excited to see what your prints look like and to see what really is possible with just styrofoam and some basic materials. So like I said, if you're just using markers today, you'll just want to color onto your plate directly and move kind of quickly so that your markers don't dry up on your styrofoam. If you're using ink, like I am right here, and hopefully not really watery ink, I've already rolled up my brayer, so I'm gonna start to ink up my plate, like you can see right here. You can always reapply ink to your brayer. Excited to see how it comes out, and hopefully I wrote my letters correctly so we can read what I wrote. And now's always a good time to just test out if you put the right amount of ink onto your plate. So I'd say start out with less, and you can always do a couple proofs to see how that amount of ink works.
And we had a question in the chat about if you wet your paper at all. Is it all for both processes? Do you keep the paper dry?
So if you want to stick with the more traditional printmaking materials like oil-based inks and use printmaking paper, then you can definitely go ahead, wet your paper and dry it, and then just go about it how you would with any type of like a linoleum plate or a wood plate. You can go about that same process. But I'm gonna just go ahead and not wet my paper and just start with some newsprint proofs, and maybe I can switch over to a thicker paper and try it without wetting, and we can see what happens. And we have about 10 more minutes together too, so I'll try to keep a few minutes at the end for us to share our creations and any findings that you all had. Okay, so time for the printing. So you should have your ink fully, or your plate fully inked up or fully drawn on with your markers. And I've already cut up some newsprint to the size that will work for my plate. And what I'm gonna do, you can do a couple things. First off, if you want to make a template so you know exactly where your plate's going to fall onto your paper, what you can do is with some newsprint, just on the bottom, you can trace your piece of paper onto the newsprint, just like I'm doing here. And I'm sorry, I'm moving a little quickly, so you can take longer to do this more perfectly if you want. And then the next thing that I'm gonna do, so that kind of just shows me where I'm gonna place my paper, how big my paper is. I'll take my styrofoam plate, and I know that I'm gonna want this to be printed exactly in the middle of my paper. So if I want, I can trace this, or I just feel pretty good that this is gonna be the center. So I'm gonna go ahead, move some things out of the way so you all can better see. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and line up my paper. So a way that I'm going to do that, since I created this little template, is I'll just hold up this piece of paper to the edge right here, hold it down with a couple of fingers, and then just let it drop. And then I'm gonna press it down here so it doesn't move. And this is an important step. You do not want your styrofoam piece to move. It's also a good time for you to go and wash your hands if you have ink all over them, because you do, you want to try to keep your paper as clean as possible. So I have a wooden spoon right here. And like I said, this is the tool that I'm going to use to apply pressure, kind of like a Baron or a printing press. And the way that I'm going to do that is to just start rubbing from one corner down, all the way down to the bottom, and make my way across the whole print. So you want to apply a decent amount of pressure and make sure that you just hit all areas of your print. And this is going to just be a proof. So we'll see kind of what is happening, what I need to change to make a better print, all of those fun things. And the thing you can do also is just kind of peel up a corner and see how things are coming out. So I think that's kind of a good darkness right here, but we'll just keep going. And you can also see that I'm just keeping a hand down the entire time to make sure that my paper is not moving. And if you use markers, you're just going to be doing the same exact process right now. If you don't have a wooden spoon, think about what you have laying around that just has kind of a flat bottom like this where you can apply pressure. I was recently told that using an old cabinet handle is a really great alternative for a Baron. And I'm kind of just turning my paper around as I go, just because that works well for me and helps me make sure I'm not forgetting to rub any areas of my print. And if you're really into hand rubbing prints and are doing that beyond this workshop here, I'm happy to share some suggestions of different types of Barons you can use because I know it can be difficult to get that even pressure sometimes, especially when you're using different materials like wood or linoleum. How things are coming along. Looking pretty good. Looks like I could still use a little more pressure at the bottom. All right. I'm gonna lift it up and see what we've made. Are y'all ready for the big reveal? All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So here's my print. And I think I'm pretty happy about it. And for those of you who asked if we should be using pen, I can see right here that some of those pen marks did come through. I think that will stop happening once I've done a couple proofs. That will kind of fade out, but that is something to keep in mind. But I think the pen was really useful to help me get these like nice thick lines that you can see. And I think I'm pretty happy with how my print turned out. So another fun thing that you can do if you want to print with multiple colors is the next step I would do is take out my X-Acto blade and cut out different areas of my styrofoam. So maybe I'm gonna cut out this entire jar and these flowers around it, but I'm gonna do a really careful job so that in the end, after I've inked up my flowers and my background, I can carefully put those back together and then print it in one go.
So you would selectively ink up sections of it and then put it back together like a puzzle?
Yeah, that's exactly. Thanks, Logan. So I would, get the different colors of ink ready onto my inking palette and ink them up separately and then put them back together to then rub my print at the end. And then after you've done your first go, it's a good time to just kind of come back in and make some more edits and just look at your print and think about what do I really like and what do I wish was a little bit different. I noticed that a lot of my lines they're all the same quality of lines since I just used one tool. So I think if I were to do this again, I would try to get a variety of tools to keep my image more interesting and to have different types of lines and textures on my print. Just like you would do and using different gouges if you're using linoleum cutters, things like that.
What was the paper that you used at the beginning when you were tracing your drawing? Was it just transparent paper?
It was just newsprint.
Oh.
Yeah, so just like a thin scrap paper, and because there was styrofoam directly under it, when I traced it, I used a lot of pressure and it just transferred that image directly onto my styrofoam.
Okay,
so,
and then you redrew it on the plate or on the styrofoam.
Exactly, I just traced over those lines. So it's a cool way to, if you don't want to take out tracing paper or carbon paper or anything like that, you can just have a thin piece of paper and go directly onto the styrofoam and it will trace your image just with a lot of pressure.
And you also drew your image on newsprint, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's right. I'm glad you all enjoyed the demo. If you all are welcome to reach out with any questions or send me pictures of your creations. Thanks, everybody. I hope you all have fun.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ariel.
Thank you.